Hi, my name is Sidra. My background is interior architecture and design, and I am Minty Living's chief creative and co founder.
And my name is Ben. I have a background in software engineering and technology entrepreneurship, and I am Minty Living's CEO and co founder. Minty Living is Atlanta's largest furnished rental provider. We're just under 200 units. We've grown that in just under 4 years, along with a highly scalable and highly profitable vacation rental manager that is looking to scale on a national basis.
Today, we're going to share a little bit about what we wish we had known at 20 units. Um, we imagine you're similar to where we were, which is just focused on growth and starting to pull your hair out a little bit at the roots because you're realizing it's more and more complex than you ever thought it could be.
Great. Let's kick it off. What we wish we knew when we had 20 units under management. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about that?
Um, Back in those early days, every every time the system broke, I didn't even know what the system was yet, right? I just realized when it was breaking. And if I could have shared one thing with us at that point, it would have been planning for failure, systematizing failure, and knowing what that was. But because of the size, we didn't have the data of how often a lockout happened or how frequently a smoke detector would fail and shriek and wake up a guest in the night. We hadn't yet seen those patterns emerge yet because we still didn't have enough. So each time it caught us unaware, and it was midnight on a Friday or a Sunday or 3 in the morning, and it always felt it always felt so drastic and so urgent. And it's really hard having those many spikes to the cortisol, even though we were doing an excellent job and 5-star ratings and all this stuff. It still is inevitable. So yeah, planning for failure would be a really big thing.
I think I think you also bring up a really good point when you talk about some of the issues was that it took until later on for us to realize that we needed to bifurcate an issue. Anytime an issue came across the bow, it was, is this something that can be upstreamed? For example, the issue around locks and saying, okay, great, well, then we can, outside of every keyless entry pad, we can also have a lockbox and we can create an upstream solution to this problem. I watched you create these upstream solutions time and again, but it really wasn't until we had the awareness to be able to say, wait a second, we have to think about every problem as to how frequently is it occurring and is it something that can actually be solved upstream. And I think that was a huge realization that I wish I had known when we had 20 units under management.
Well, I remember, your proclivity to start gathering data even at that, and I thought it was ridiculous, even at that phase. You're like, what are you doing? Like, we're not enterprise anything. No, it's all about the data. It's all about the data. And starting to flag and tag these instances of address and um, realizing the common tags for, you know, uh, smoke alarm failure, batteries running low on the keypads, a light bulb that needed to get changed were some of our most frequent write-ins. People think a light bulb, for instance, is not a drastic thing, but they're still going to be kind of peeved if it's their bedside reading lamp and it's out and you still have to send maintenance, and it's still, costs the same amount of money to send maintenance out to address the light bulb in the bedside lamp as it does to fix the toilet flapper on occasion. And it was because of your interest in the data that we realized these patterns. And then one of our early successes was creating that guest survival kit. And we started stocking every unit with a small hardware kit, extra batteries of all sizes, the TV remote. People get pissed when the TV remote runs out of batteries. Oh my God, you would think it was like, the world's worst thing. So stocking batteries of each size, stocking light bulbs in, a closet somewhere. And having a little screwdriver so that if the smoke detector does start shrieping at 11 p.m. on a Sunday, and a step ladder. We started stocking a step ladder in our guest survival kit. And then we just knew, get on the phone, oh, your step ladder's here. There's an extra, cache of batteries. And most guests would prefer to be able to fix that annoying thing in the moment rather than wait for you.
Yeah.
And it's cheap. It's cheaper. It's cheaper.
Which I think is another piece, which is this element of helping guests to self-resolve.
Yeah.
And I think as remote team members grow, and maybe we'll talk about that, it can often be very easy to create a task for, okay, we're going to have maintenance come out. We're going to have cleaning come out, or quality assurance. And ensuring that there is a general belief that self-resolution is an appropriate thing to ask for many
and
of
that
these
the guest
issues.
won't begrudge you, right?
Yeah.
The guest just wants whatever's quickest.
Yeah.
They want it addressed. They want new batteries in their TV remote in the next 5 minutes, not the next 5 hours.
Yeah.
To your point.
Yeah. I'd love to go back to your piece about plan for failure, because we've talked about the nuance and the specifics around tasks and understanding, how do I upstream tasks? How do I aggregate the tasks that are causing the most problems with guests, with owners, and then figure out how to upstream those and ensure that we're able to resolve them before they occur. I think we can also go one step higher around the vision of the company and say plan for failure. So if you've got 20 units under management, like we did at one point, we had an idea as to what we wanted to be and how we were going to get there. We knew that we wanted to get to 100 units, and our path as to how we thought we were going to get there was a very straight and narrow, well-defined path. And I think there is that piece of it.
Can you go into that a little bit more? Like, what felt so well-defined about our vision to grow to 100?
So in our minds at the time, it was very much about doing this at scale. The goal was to say, okay, great, we are going to have this person, we're going to raise capital, we're going to bring somebody on to run site selection, we're going to bring somebody on to run property onboarding, bring somebody on to run growth, and by doing that, we will then be able to grow by 10 to 15 properties per month. You then take us to a 2-year time horizon, we're managing over 200 units, and we've likely gone to another city as well. And I think that is a wonderful vision to have. Of course, the way that outside forces respond isn't always in alignment with what your vision is. And of course, we went out and tried to raise venture capital when the venture markets really collapsed in March of 23. And so we needed to find a way to be able to grow, not at 15 units per month, but at 3 to 4 to 5 units per month. And that was not a plan that was put together. There was no plan that we had put together to say, okay, so how are we going to grow at a lower growth rate and do it profitably? Mm-hmm. The goal before was to say, well, onboarding new properties is a cost that we are willing to bear in order to grow inventory, because the future value of that inventory growth has a positive ROI on the cost that we're going to spend for that property to onboard those properties.
Yeah, growth really was a loss leader initially.
And so I think that was not clearly that planning for failure and saying, okay, great, that's wonderful. We're going to grow by 10 to 15 units per month in our plan A, and what is our plan B and what is our plan C? And if I had a better awareness of planning for what those fail safes looked like, then it would have been much easier to transition. Whereas I think when it came time for us to transition to, we're focusing on profitable growth, we're focusing on profitable operations at scale, that would have already been something that I would have built out.
But I don't know if we could have realistically arrived at, plans B and C until we had experimented as well. And, like we had hired locally for what we viewed as key roles, and then very much felt trapped by the infrastructure that we had built because it cost too much, and it wasn't until we started really exploring remote support, largely out of the Philippines and Brazil, that we realized how effective remote support could be that allowed us to trade in for plans B and C. Like, do you think we could have done it in the beginning, not knowing what we know now?
I don't think I don't think you change your plan A, right? Your plan
Yeah.
A stays your plan A, but there's an awareness that plan A very well may not succeed, and I need to figure out a plans B and C. And I don't feel like that was something that we had clearly defined.
Yeah.
So let's see what else. We have the next piece for what we wish we knew at 20 units. I'll take this one. This one is around tech stack. We spent a lot of time switching and changing technology, and it was a tremendous cost. This industry is very unique because unlike a task management system where I can just say, oh, let me see how this task management system works. I'm going to go ahead and create 30 tasks and see how it works. And it's very easy. The cost, the hurdle to be able to use the technology effectively is very, very low. This industry is very different. You have to onboard your properties. You have to see how the properties function on the different channels. You have to integrate the systems with the other applications that you're using. And so the technology is very, very important to be able to enable at the early phases. So I think what I would have done is I would have spoken to more people. I would have reached out to other providers that had 100 units, that had 200 units, to understand what their technology stack looked like. We did a pretty comprehensive process of looking for the best technology providers, but we still ended up switching so much. We switched several times on a number of our systems. And I think I would have spent more time initially getting that right and seeking out the advice of people that would know and understanding what their goals and objectives were and making sure that was aligned with what we were trying to accomplish. And I would have gotten the technology right at 20 units because it's a lot harder to change.
So much. And it's frustrating for everyone you've got involved at that point, too. It's a huge lift.
Yeah.
I think, too, every PMS, every property management software tells you they're this panacea of everything they can think of: guest communication, vendor communication, task management, guest experience, and reservations. And you can get a good chunk, but then if you're not yet sophisticated, you're missing like core needs, right, that the PMS doesn't offer. And I think it took us a while to really see that the PMSs were not this all-in-one solution, and that we could ultimately offer a much better guest experience by patching in different best-in-class applications.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe what would be those insights, if you will, of what the PMSs weren't able to provide, and why we even thought we needed to assemble a tech stack? Why not just use the PMS?
I think there is clear value in understanding what each piece of software is supposed to do. And back to the how hard it is to really understand what any of the software can do, because it's so hard to actually onboard your properties and use it and try it out and understand how it's different. So from that perspective, I think really understanding the clear function for each of the pieces of software was critical. We realized we really just wanted a PMS to be a booking engine. We really just wanted a PMS to be an integration for our website, and that drove the decision-making process instead of a PMS that was trying to be many different things and many different parts, which of course we ended up building very much on our own, a lot of those different pieces.
And why did we just want our PMS to be our booking engine?
Because we weren't able to get the value that we needed on the other functions. Because at the end of the day, we had a very sophisticated requirement around how do we perform physical tasks in physical space and yet make them highly measurable. That wasn't something that a PMS or a vendor management platform was going to be able to give us. And so we had to build our own data architecture to be able to do that. It really was about this consistency of experience that has been a huge lift for us. And yet I think we have very effectively identified and succeeded in creating this consistency of guest experience. We have a 4.9 Google star rating with 400 reviews. We're Superhosts on Airbnb, all of these different facets that demonstrate the experience that we're able to create, I think is really driven by this element of what we realized we needed to build on our own.
Mm-hmm. I also remember with reservations, it was very simply PMSs, the property management systems that we were using would only allow us to book one type of guest profile, right? Which is a short-term rental. And as soon as we tried to move into monthly rentals, it would start to fall apart, it wouldn't display monthly pricing. And then similarly, when we started moving into hourly rentals for location work, photography, videography, super lucrative, not as frequent, it would fall apart. And so because we were so focused on maximizing revenue in unique ways and really looking at, well, here's a physical asset that we have access to. What are all the ways we can monetize it? It being limited in how we could use it. And then similarly, guest experience, it wasn't, we brought in Breezeway, right, to look at how we were communicating with our vendors and how we were scheduling vendors. And that was a huge bump up when we brought in Breezeway on top of our PMS to contribute to guest experience. But it took us a while, to realize that we weren't effectively managing vendors as efficiently as we could.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of what else was the communications with guests. Why did we choose to go with a different, customer experience? So why did we loop in GHL?
Yeah. I think again back to what we wanted our communications platform to do and what we wanted it to be. We wanted a very sophisticated capability set of an event-driven architecture. We wanted to make it so that when things happened, we could do other stuff. We wanted to, and we realized that the communications platform that we chose was really a digital marketing asset as well. And the fact that many PMSs that offer communications really don't have an extremely solid CRM or digital marketing capability set meant that we were losing a lot of the opportunity to remarket and retarget to our existing guests that, of course, had these wonderful experiences. And so I think it again distilled down to what was the function that we wanted our omni-channel communication platform to be. If it was just communicating with the guest, I think you're exactly right. We would have gone with something that was just out of the box PMS. But our needs were, and our vision for it was more sophisticated. We wanted it to be able to do something much more, and that's why we shifted and integrated, the a well-known application to in a very untraditional way into our technology stack.
Well, and it was really that addition that helped us master our upsells to guests, right? And at this point, our upsells represent approximately what?
It's about a 15% increase on our top line revenue.
Yeah, 15% bump. So by going out of the box from what the PMS provided us, and because we could get a little bit more sophisticated, automated, and timed, we were able to get this, 15% bump on what we could generate. And that was straight profit to our company, which, as we know, is a very thin margin business.
Yeah.
So even though we were increasing tech spend, we were finding ways of increasing value to our company in a unique way. Yeah. I think similarly, Slack, getting on Slack with core team members and remote team members, and really being able to organize. I still hear of companies that are sending everything by email or WhatsApp, which is just like, it mind boggles me every time. Like, what? That really helped us organize intra-company, communications in a much more efficient way. Yeah. So I do think it's helpful, like, for us to consider, even though it's introducing additional expense, it can also introduce additional revenue and ultimately guest experience. This is the name of the game is guest experience, right? Like, if you are providing incredible hospitality and able to do it cost efficiently, to be around for the rebooking, you will have a guest that books with you again, ultimately.
Yeah. Maybe to finish off the topic, why don't you share with us what you wish you had known at 20 Properties around new property onboarding?
Yeah. I think the easy error that pretty much all property management companies, when they're growing, face is growth. And usually it's this philosophy of growth at all costs, because you've started managing enough units that it is now technically a full-time job. You're likely not able to do anything else, and you're doing it close to full-time. And you don't have time as a result, right? Like, it really does start to eat into your 24/7. And so the easy low hanging fruit is like, oh, just grow, just take any property anywhere. Like, yes, I'll manage it. But what you don't realize is taking on bad properties will consume you logistically and not give you that increase in revenue that is so needed. And so it is incredibly beneficial to you to be very selective in only choosing properties that will meet your qualifications for brand, if that is what you're going for, as well as location, because location is so huge. It's the only way you're going to meet your revenue projections. And otherwise, you've just taken on owner churn. That's it. And the cost, going back to, how laborious it is to onboard properties and get everything set up, the cost of acquisition becomes even more so with a high churn rate. It'll just drag you down, within not instantaneously, but within the year, those properties will churn because those owners aren't making enough revenue. So they're gone. You will have sunk all this additional resource. And then usually it's, the soft cost of having a squeaky owner because they're upset because they're not making enough revenue, you know, and the disappointment of like when they're like, I'm just going to sell. And then the disappointment of, you know, taking on a property that's not easy to serve because it's too far out of the way. And then it costs too much to send the vendors there. And so there's or a delay. There's a cost of delay to get the vendors there. And so it's a poorer guest experience. And, you know, it's going to find you.
What really is when you look at a new property, you know, we have kind of our submission form, if you will, that new owners can submit a form to be managed by Minty Living. You know, we get one submission about every 2 days, sometimes one a day. When you are reviewing the potential properties that are coming into the portfolio, what are you looking at?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I'm a location snob. I think it's from the years we lived in New York, for instance, and even Pittsburgh and Atlanta. And the block that you're on really does truly matter. There's a reason, you know, real estate always hikes up its rates for this hyper premium locale, you know, like the market understands location. And ultimately, I don't take on a property I wouldn't want to stay in, because I know that if I'm able to address myself as a target audience and I've captured me, I've also captured, you know, 99% of the other people that maybe aren't quite as snobby but still care to some degree. So that's one of the biggest ones is location. I jokingly say like every door has to be within walking distance to the independent coffee shop. But if you're going to address the urban market, that's why people come to these cities. They come and they live in, you know, inside of town because they want the ease of access. They want coffee, they want grocery, they want easy transportation, they want parks, they want restaurants. So if that statement falls apart, it's just not going to be as wanted of a place, you know, as it could be. And those properties ultimately will drag you down because they'll churn. You won't make the money. The owners will leave.
Are there any elements around configuration? So you could have two properties, let's say, that are even on the same block to the same independent coffee shop. Are there any specifics around configuration that you really think about that you wish you had known at 20, or maybe you already knew at 20, but who somebody who has 20 units might be able to take as a helpful guide?
It's about price point. There's a lot more shoppers at lower price points than there are shoppers at higher price points. And our current portfolio really does break down into, call it a third of studio 1 bedrooms, a third 2 bedrooms, and the remaining third 3 bedrooms and more. And we've really found a huge amount of marketability for the smaller units. It's easier to keep them filled than the bigger ones. So the bigger ones had better be freaking awesome to drive demand and traffic. They need to be unique. They need to be special, and really distinguish themselves. And then I would say the sweet spot is a 2 bedroom, 2 bath. Like if I could line one most common request from guests, it's a 2 bedroom, 2 bath. They always want that second bathroom because they don't want to share it with a kid or a friend. And I've found that interesting because it never was something I cared too much about, but that is the most commonly requested thing.
Great. And what about if you were to find 2,000 square foot, 2 bedroom, 1.5 bath, but one was a basement unit and one was a townhome? Anything around like actual configurations of, somebody wants you to manage their ADU or their carriage house versus their, the lower floor. Any considerations there?
Yeah, basements are always, being the bottom dweller is never like hyper desirable. You're going to have more complaints of sound transfer. You're going to have less great lighting conditions, more issues ultimately with like moisture because everything flows down. So I am always cautious about taking true basement apartments of any configuration.
But not lower level. You don't view lower level as basement.
No, I don't view lower
Okay.
level as basement. If there's like good light, people really like good lighting. So lighting is a huge quality that renters are always looking for, regardless of which floor they live on.
Is there a certain time of day that you're touring a unit to get a sense of its lighting?
Like to spec it out, I usually can just tell at this point with, you know, window placement. They call it fenestration, the amount of openings in a building.
Oh, really?
It doesn't
Okay.
really matter what time of day, but if you're not experienced, then, you know, maybe tour in the afternoon. But again, like taking on property, you're going to know what your a better lit property will have better photos. It's hard to create that lovely, luscious, light-filled feeling
Yeah.
in a super dark, you know, barely any windows place.
Great.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we hope you found this of use and of value. Of course, if there's any additional things you'd like us speaking about, any insights or comments you have, please leave them below. We'd love to respond to them, and we'll be doing this on a pretty consistent basis. So we'll take your feedback, wind that into future conversations. And this is Ben and Sidra from Minty Living signing off.